Are you ready to see how Leggari products can transform your space? But first, let's check out the before footage. Here it is, guys. We coated the counters and the floors. This video is going to show you the step-by-step process how to recreate this look using a Leggari floor kit.
I'm going to show you how to mix up our prep replacement primer. So you have the part A and the part B. We're going to take the lid off of the part A, and we're going to pour about 1/4 to 1/2 out of it. Then we're going to take our drill on low speed, and we're just going to mix because there will be some components of the part A that will actually settle. You can also stir this up, blend this together with just a standard paint stick. It doesn't take much to mix it up. There's nothing in the bottom of it. And then we'll take our part B and we'll add all of our part B to it. Now, we've designed these sticks to fit inside the lid so you can actually scrape out these really thick products easily. The part B is very thick, very sticky. This is really the part of the product that creates all the magic for it. Incredible bonding. All right, now we want to mix this together on a decent speed for about 2 minutes. All right, that's how you mix the prep replacement primer. We want to show you how to apply our prep replacement primer. So we're ready to roll out with an 18-inch roller, and then we're going to cut in our edges with a quart container with a standard 4-inch paintbrush. You don't need an expensive paintbrush, obviously. You're just going to throw it away after this. You could wash it out because the prep replacement is a water-based primer, but a cheap brush will work. So we'll pour out the majority in here so that it's easier to manage. What we're going to do is we want to just bring the prep replacement off the wall about 4 to 6 inches so that the person with the 18-inch roller doesn't have to hit the wall every time they want to roll out. It makes the job go very quick. So the prep replacement, one kit will go anywhere from about 500 square feet to 1,000, depending on the porosity of the concrete. This is fairly smooth because it did have a coating on previously, and as you can see, they weren't able to get a lot of it up, so that's kind of the point of this primer. So it'll go pretty far on this. We'll probably get 700 to 900 square feet per kit on this. So we're just gonna dip in here. Just gonna cut in the wall like this. And it's gonna seem like it's not doing much, but you'll be blown away at how sticky and how well this bonds to the substrate. And it'll go clear very quickly. Again, we just want to cut it in because I don't want to hit the wall because the sheetrock is actually dropping a lot of stuff on this floor. Everything's taped off, ready to go. I just want to bring that out about 4 to 6 inches so that the person who's using the 18-inch roller, in this case it'd be Tyler, doesn't have to get close to the wall. Now I'm showing you how to do this on my knees. Obviously you want to wear knee pads, or what's even better is you can put one of these on a pole. You can just tape a paintbrush on a pole And you're just gonna feather it out where it's really thin. You want it really thin. Now this will go clear probably within the next 10 to 15 minutes. And we just wanna go around the whole perimeter. Now what makes it easy for the guy who's rolling, you wanna get him going as quickly as possible. So I'll go down this wall about halfway, and then I'll go down this wall about halfway so that he can start rolling before I move on. You always wanna have this guy working because he's the one who's gonna help you finish quickly. Now as I begin to finish this first section so that Tyler can start rolling, notice he's soaking up the entire roller and then he's just rolling off any excess. I mean, you don't want this dripping like crazy across the floor, so he's completely saturated the roller. He spun off a little bit just to get rid of any excess again. And now you can see he's able to get about 1.5 passes. The smoother the floor, the farther it will go. Notice he's really working it into the surface. Also notice how he doesn't need to get very close to the wall. Now every once in a while, if he ends up dipping too much and pushing it against the wall, I can just go down here and I can feather that out. This is a very forgiving product, one of our most forgiving products. Then when he dips and he rolls again, notice how he's overlapping a few inches. You always want to overlap. Notice how the edges, where I first started over here in the corner, they're already going dry, they're already clear. That's how fast this sets up. Now you have about a 2-hour window. Once this is rolled out, you want to apply the next primer within about 2 hours. This is the most glorious part of the job right here. It's going to be the guy who needs to cut in the edges. It's going to be his responsibility to get down and dirty and get around the toilet and these areas that are hard to reach. I know that we probably can't get an 18-inch roller in here with the roller frame. We're obviously not going to get in back behind the toilet, but we need to make it manageable for the guy with the 18-inch roller. So it helps to have a 4-inch, whatever you call this, paintbrush. It's going to be the same process. I'm just going to cut in. I'm just going to work this whole area though. Okay, so when you're using the prep replacement, every once in a while, if there's a really smooth spot and it's having trouble laying out nicely like it would on really well sanded or grinded concrete, sometimes it'll try to separate. So if you just wait a couple minutes, let that set up, and then just hit it again, it'll bond even better and all the separation will go away. So Tyler's working in this room. He's almost out of this room. I just finished this room. Now as the guy who's cutting in the edges, I can continue to just work into the rest of this building. And I can just continue. It's not going to affect the process if he comes about 10, 20, 25 minutes later and rolls over this. It won't affect it at all. But notice how it's already even starting to change color in the corner that we started in. That's how fast it's setting up. I would say maybe another 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and it'll start going clear. Once it's clear, you can now do the next step of your process, whether you want to go directly over the prep replacement primer or do an additional WB primer, which we recommend, especially in cases like this where you really should pigment the substrate before doing the metallic epoxy. So we've just applied our prep replacement primer. Now we're going to put our WB primer on top of that. It's really important that right when the prep replacement primer goes clear, that you start rolling on the WB primer. So it's the same process. I'm gonna pour out a lot of the WB primer into our 18-inch roller tray. And because I'm walking on spikes, I'm going to cut in the edges with another 4-inch brush on a pole. Again, another really forgiving primer. I just want to cut in right in front of Tyler so that he doesn't have to touch the walls or hit the walls or anything like that with his roller. We're trying to make the guy with the 18-inch roller go as fast as possible. That's kind of the point of me cutting in. So whoever's cutting in, that's his only job, is to make sure that the guy who's rolling constantly rolls. So I'm just gonna get a little bit in front of him. And notice I'm going about 4 inches out. All right, now I'm doing the same process where I'm just trying to give Tyler an ability to roll, and I'm going to continue to move in front of him. I'm not going to stop. I don't have to wait for him before I start the next room. I can just continue along the whole job. So what he did is he soaked up a brand new roller. This roller has already been de-shed. We rolled it on masking tape to remove as many loose hairs as we could. And he's just rolling. Notice he doesn't have to get right up on the wall. And he's getting about 1 1/4 passes, and he'll be able to stretch it as he moves, as that roller soaks up more stuff. But it's going to go very far on top of this prep replacement primer. You're probably going to get about 500 to 1,000 square feet a kit. Now, you don't necessarily want to risk it and measure out the job where you think it's going to go 1,000. You probably want to factor it on the lower end of that because you don't know what you're going to run into. If you have a lot of really porous areas on the substrate, you definitely want to factor it close to the 500 square feet per kit. But notice when he dips again, he's just overlapping about 6 inches. Really simple. That's one of the nice things about wearing spikes as well, is he can actually walk on that a little bit if he needs to.
Okay guys, we're ready for the metallic epoxy base coat. We have our silver mixed up. Tim's my dedicated mixer, so he's constantly gonna be mixing batches, sending them to me. I'm gonna be applying them on the floor, spreading it out, and then applying the highlights. The primer's been down for about 45 minutes. You can tell it's dry, it doesn't look wet. You do not wanna wait longer than about 2 to 3 hours after you apply the primer to do your epoxy. So make sure if you're doing primer, you have enough time in that day to do your epoxy coat. So what I'm gonna do, this is our first batch. I'm gonna pour out beads across this floor. That's a beautiful color. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take our squeegee magic trowel and I'm gonna start spreading this out across the floor, trying to cover the floor. I don't wanna pull it so tight you can see the floor. I wanna leave a little bit behind. Best way to do that, hold it at an angle. I don't need anyone doing my edges because I can get right to them. And they're also doing trim. So that'll cover up the edges, make them look really good. And if this is your first time doing epoxy, I don't recommend doing, you know, large sections like we are. We're basically gonna do 9 gallons and then we're gonna add our highlights. I recommend doing at least half of that, 4.5 gallons, even a 3-gallon kit, and then add your highlights. So I like to go around my perimeter, getting on my edges, and then I can just focus on coating the middle of the floor. So you can see it's really simple. We're not applying too much pressure, making sure our roller or our squeegee's at an angle. Because if I hold it straight up and down, it's really easy to pull too much. Keeping that at an angle, it kind of lets you leave a decent amount behind. All right, so I'm gonna finish this bathroom up, same process, just spreading this out so we can completely cover the floor, and then by then Tim should have the next batch. I'm actually gonna tell him to start mixing that batch up. Okay, so now that I have it spread out, I'm gonna take a 6-inch roller. If you have a large floor, you can use an 18-inch roller. And I wanna soak my roller up somewhere where I know it's thick. And I can tell it's a little thick here because it's gonna soak some of that epoxy up into the roller. And it'll take a second for that to get soaked up all the way. But the whole trick with this is you don't wanna hear your roller. You want it to sound like this, where you don't hear no stickiness. And now we're just gonna quickly hit the whole floor. And this will help level out any thick spots. You'll be able to tell if it gets really sticky, you have some thin spots, you can push some product there. And you wanna move quick. You don't wanna go so quick that you're throwing epoxy up on your walls, but it doesn't take long. And before you guys start your epoxy, or actually the project in general, make sure you acclimate your products to room temperature. Because if the resin's really cold, the primers are cold, they're gonna be a lot thicker. They're gonna be a little harder to work with. So just set them in the house for a couple days before you actually start your project. That way everything's the same temperature. All right, so once I do my next batch, I'll do the base coat on this next area, and then we'll come back and we'll add highlights and blend those in. Okay, so I know I need to pull this batch out into this room about 3 feet. So I'm just going to complete the same process, continue what we did in here, squeegee it, roll it, and then I'll explain the highlights, add in the highlights. So notice when I'm moving my bead, I'm trying to keep a nice straight line instead of getting all jagged and crooked. That's going to make it easier when I butt up to this pour with our next pour after the highlights. All right, so now it's highlight time. Again, guys, like I said before, if this is your first time, you're not gonna wanna do this much square footage before you add your highlights. You're gonna wanna basically focus on maybe one room at a time, because again, I've done this a lot, so I move a lot faster. So it's better to do smaller sections, more of them. You're gonna get a more consistent look. It's gonna be easier on you to do it. But as far as highlights go, I'm gonna be doing a vein pattern. I'm gonna be drizzling it off the paint stick. And then instead of swirling it with the roller, I'm gonna use the squeegee. It'll give it a little bit more of a natural look. So this right here is our highlight batch for both of these sections. So I wanna go around first and just get my veins. Because I wanna make sure I have enough for this both these sections before I run out. And then I can come back and add to these sections. But again, I don't want to run out halfway through and then need to mix up more white or whatever. Maybe I don't have enough. And when I'm doing these veins, I'm kind of trying to make sure I go different directions. So I don't want to do the same vein pattern over and over. And I'm doing a little bit longer veins. You can do shorter ones. I'm just gonna go through real quick, get some color down on everywhere. All right, so I got about half left of what I started with, but I have color everywhere now. So just in case I run out, at least I have color over the whole floor. So now I'll go back, I'll add to some of these. I don't necessarily need to add to every single one. And I'm just gonna pour it out. So I wanna be a little random. We'll have some thicker ones, we'll have some thinner ones. But I wanna try to keep it on the same vein pattern that I have right now. And then I also want to save a little bit to hit my edges. So I want to go in between some of these right to the wall. Because I don't want this floor to look like it stops at the wall. We want to make it look like it goes under the walls. So again, more random the better. I'm not adding color to every single vein. Just kind of randomly adding a little more. All right, so now I have a little left, and I want to go and just get some color in between all these, right to that wall. Anywhere that kind of looks like a bare spot. And what that's going to do is help make it look like this continues under the walls. But if you just do the inside of the floor and don't get any color to your edges, it's going to look weird once you're all done. So now we're going to take the squeegee again, and we're just going to blend this, kind of skipping across the surface, not applying a lot of pressure. Again, we don't want to move the product a lot, we just want to kind of blend the white in. And we're just looking for enough to where it doesn't look like we poured a vein or a bead out. And I'm kind of following the vein pattern. We want to hit the whole floor. You can kind of tell that still looks like a bead that was poured out, so I'll kind of keep working that a little. Get that to blend in a little more. Like we can see a couple spots that you can tell just need a little bit more blending. This one, I'm tilting my squeegee at an angle to really get those hard edges in. And then when we spray the isopropyl on here, it'll create some really cool dispersing effects. But if you look around, notice we have white right to our edges. So it looks really good. Everything's kind of flowing. Again, this still has a lot to move. So I'll just continue this process and then we'll spray the isopropyl. So if you haven't noticed, when I'm blending this, notice I'm going all different directions. I'm kind of trying to keep it really random instead of doing the same thing over and over. Now I'm just going to double check, make sure like right here, kind of some hard lines. Kind of blend those in a little more. Okay, so before Tim gets me my next batch, I'm going to spray the dispersing effect on this. All right, so what I'm using, 91% isopropyl clear. If you want to add color to this, like our metallics, you can. You just add the powder to the clear isopropyl, shake it up, and you can spray that to add some more colors out here. But we're just going to do clear, and what it's going to do is create some cells where the white's thinned out into the silver. So it'll be really cool. I'll kind of start here, work my way out. Now what I'm trying to do is get big drops, so I'm barely pulling the trigger. But you can see immediately it creates a really cool effect. And since we are using our white and not a metallic white, it's gonna, those cells are all gonna stay. And I'll show you what I mean. So you can see anywhere the white's kind of thinned out with the silver, not where it's thick, doesn't really affect it, just where it's thin, it pushes that white out and creates these really cool cells, and most of those will stay. A lot of the cells in this metallic will disappear because we're spraying it so soon. But again, I'm just barely pulling the trigger, trying to get them big drops. You don't want too big of drops. Trying not to spray it heavy where I'm going to blend it. It's okay if I get a little bit there, but I don't want to be blending this into the epoxy when I go to blend that next section into the first section. All right, so now we're pouring our second, or actually our third batch. So this is pretty simple. This needs to get me half of this room, basically. So I'm going to work on the spot that's going to take the longest, is getting under here first. I'll just push it up, pull it out. So I don't want to go too far into this floor and screw up our design. Now I'm just making sure we got a good even coat in there. All right, so you guys kind of saw the process of each basically batch that we made. We're going to continue this out until we finish the whole floor, adding the highlights. We'll finish out the base coat, add the highlights, blend it, and then do the isopropyl, and then everything will look like the first section that we did. All right, so we're getting ready to apply the WB urethane and matte. We got it mixed up already. The pot life for the urethane, about 2 hours. You don't want to use it past that really. Again, we don't recommend just letting it sit in the bucket and go to lunch and come back and try to roll it out. But it will not flash off. It will sit in the bucket for quite a while. The other thing, you want to top coat within 24 hours of doing your epoxy coat. And if you come in the next day and you're leaving minor footprints and stuff, those will rebound back. But if it's really, really soft, you might want to let it, give it a couple more hours or come back the next morning. And that's usually in cold temps. So if the concrete's cold, epoxy is going to take longer to set up. Other than that, relatively simple. We're going to be going this way throughout the whole job so we can end out that door. So make sure you kind of map out which way you're going to go, which makes it the easiest way to get off the job. So we're going to be using a 1/2 inch roller for the matte because we want to use a bigger nap for the matte urethane. It'll cover better. If you do a 3/8 nap, sometimes you'll see small little spots of the gloss epoxy still. So using a little thicker nap, it's going to put it on a little bit thicker and it's going to eliminate those spots. So we've already de-shedded the roller. Alex is over here cutting in my edges for me. And then once he gets out here a little ways, I can start doing the roller. So we're using a 18-inch roller tray. We got a garbage bag over it, that way you don't have to clean it out. Really simple way, because these I think are like 20 bucks. You don't want to be buying those every job. So I'm gonna pour about half of this in here, and then Alex can use this to hit his edges, or if you have a smaller one, you can pour a little out into a 2.5 quart size container. So I'm just gonna take a second and get this saturated. Even though it looks like it's all soaked, it's not. It kind of takes a second for that to soak into the roller. So we want to just kind of keep working that in. Okay, so this is ready. Once he gets out of the bathroom, I'll go and try to finish up that bathroom. The reason we're not hitting the edges with like a 9-inch roller or 6-inch, whatever you typically use, is because when we touch this wall, chunks of the sheetrock and paint fall off on the floor. So we're kind of doing it with the paintbrush, that way we don't hit those edges and get debris on the floor. So since this is matte and we're going over a gloss surface, we want to make sure we roll it in good enough. We don't want to barely just roll over it and move on. We want to kind of make sure that it really gets rolled in. That way all the surface is covered. So I'm not worried about roller lines right now. I'm just trying to get it spread out evenly. Trying not to hit those walls. Okay, now I'm gonna just make sure I eliminate any roller lines. Notice I'm picking up as I'm pushing it. I don't want to stop and pick it up. You can kind of see it leaves a line there. If you ever have to push into the floor and pick it up, always kind of feather it off. And the matte's really forgiving on roller lines and stuff. A lot more forgiving than our gloss. They're both really easy to apply, but the matte's definitely the easiest one that we have. So again, we just want to roll a couple times in every spot. And I'm moving relatively quickly just to spread it out. And then when I go back and kind of clean everything up and get rid of roller lines, I'll be more precise with how I'm rolling it. Okay, so everything's kind of rolled out evenly. I'm just gonna do a quick back roll on here and then a back roll here. And then since I'm gonna stop into this floor, I'm gonna feather it off just like that. So notice I'm always starting in the middle of the floor and working my way to the edges after I dip it in the roller tray, because that's when I'm gonna have the most product on my roller, and I don't want to start on a wall edge and then try to push the majority of that product all the way to the other side. So again, roll it a couple times and then we'll do our back roll. And I always like to look different angles just to make sure everything's been hit. I don't say have a drip mark that dripped off one of these edges. or roller lines, or a thick roller line. So it's good to get at different angles and look at it before you move on. So I'm getting about 1.5, 1 3/4 roller width per dip in the tray. So I want to remember that and kind of keep that throughout the job. That'll give me a nice consistent thickness. That means I'm not trying to spread the product too thin. I'm not leaving it too thick. So again, checking for any missed spots, drips, roller edges. Looks really good. So I don't want to go another 2 passes and have this skinny line working out. So I'm going to do half the floor. And again, this is where you really want to feather it off when you stop, because when I do this other section, I'm going to be rolling into this one. I don't want to just stop and pick it up. And every time you do your back row, make sure you're overlapping a little bit. See how I'm feathering it off when I lift it up? I'm not just stopping and picking it up. So small rooms like this, obviously one roller width or one dip in the roller, if I start there, it's gonna be really thick because it's not a big long space to roll out. So I'll roll a bead down the middle like that, and then I'll come through and take it to the wall. So now we have obviously a wider span to hit, so probably one dip in here is going to get me one roller width pass. So again, you got to keep that in mind. We had a shorter span to fill in there. We got a lot longer here, so we're not going to get as much spread out as we did in there. So again, start in the middle. We'll go a little one way, a little bit the other way. We'll kind of just slowly work that to the edges. It's always good to try to keep a straight line too, straight as you can get it. So under this counter is going to be a little tricky. So I'm going to get this done real quick. That way I can kind of finish it out. That way I have some walking room out here. I don't kind of lock myself in. So again, we're just going to do a section and work our way out. The biggest thing is you don't want this sitting too long and then rolling into it, because you might see a roller line because that's already starting to set up. So you really need to work quick when you're letting an edge just sit there. And again, guys, we're feathering it off because we're finishing out into an already coated section. So a little trick, if you guys rollers are flattening off on the edges like this and leaving lines, quick little tip, just kind of tilt that edge that you're going to use, kind of get the excess off your roller there. And then when you go to do your back roll, it's not going to leave a line. See how it kind of feathers it in? So it feathered it in more instead of leaving a line. All right, guys, so finished up. Relatively simple process. It took us 34 minutes to coat this, 716 square feet, give or take a couple square feet. But yeah, super fast process. If you guys enjoyed this video and want to transform your existing floors, go to leggari.com and order your floor kit today.